Hello book besties! Welcome back to my channel. My name is Delaney if you are new here, and we are back with another monthly reading wrap up. We're going to be talking about the 13 books that I read in October. I feel like October was a pretty great reading month. I had a variety of genres, I stepped outside of my comfort zone, I made progress on some series. I just have a lot to talk about. I really enjoyed reading this month. I feel like there were a lot of books that made me really remember why I love reading. You know that feeling when you're reading a book and you're like, ah, this is why I love to read. I had a couple of those this month, which is always really good. But since there are 13 books to talk about, I want to jump right in. I'm just going to keep the intro short and sweet because there's a lot to talk about, and we all know your girl can yap when she gets started talking about books. So I'm going to try to keep it short and sweet and to the point, but let's jump right in. I started off the month reading Freida McFadden's new release, The Boyfriend, and this came out on October 1st, and I read the entire book on October 1st. I binge read this in one day. I could not put it down, as is true with I think most Freida McFadden books that I've ever read. They are so bingeable. Like, you just don't want to put them down until you know what the heck is going on. And her writing style, I know she gets a lot of flack for like the simplicity of her writing style. I just saw a TikTok and someone's like, Freida writes at a 5th grade reading level, which, like, okay, and? I kind of like that in a thriller, personally. Like, I'm there for the plot. I'm not there to be annotating or like for poetic, beautiful writing. Like, I'm there for the twists and turns, and Freida delivers, I think. That's my personal opinion. I know there's a bit of a divide on Freida McFadden books on the internet, but anyways, I digress. This is my new, probably 2nd or 3rd favorite Freida McFadden book. I had originally said it was my new favorite. After sitting with it, I think Never Lie is still in that top slot, but this one was really good. I ended up giving this 4 stars. Essentially, this is about a woman. She is just kind of a standard she's in her late 20s or in her 30s. I can't exactly remember how old she is, but she's on the dating apps, recently out of a relatively serious relationships and just dating around. And she ends up forming a relationship with a man that just something's a little bit off. My favorite part about this book is that we had her point of view, which is in the present day. And then we also had like this mysterious point of view from a random male character from the past, and we're like, how the heck do these two dual timelines connect? Like, it almost is an added element of being eerie because you're like, why am I getting this second perspective, and like, what does this even have to do with our main character? I was not let down by the ending. I thought I had it figured out, and it still shocked me. So this is definitely a really great read if you're looking for something just fast-paced, maybe a palate cleanser, maybe something to get you out of a slump, whatever you are needing. If you just need like a fast-paced book, I would highly recommend reading this. Like I said, 4-star rating from me, and yeah, I thought it was great. Then I read my Patreon book club's book of the month, and that is The Pumpkin Spice Cafe. This let me down. I went into this expecting cheesy Hallmark vibes, like a Hallmark movie in book form. And it was, but I honestly feel like Hallmark movies are more entertaining, more enjoyable. I hate to like be negative about books. I never want it to come across like I'm bashing on an author or bashing on anyone that's loved this book. I just don't understand the hype around this book. I honestly think it's the cover. That's the main reason this book has hype, because the male character was absolutely insufferable in my opinion. He like could not communicate for the life of him. He was just, I just didn't like him. I didn't like the male main character. The female main character was very forgettable in my opinion. The townspeople were my favorite part. Like, just the small town vibe was really the only thing I enjoyed in this book. The spice felt so misplaced and cringy. And I think the fact that this book was written in 3rd person point of view and the spice scenes were so cringy, I think that together just made it feel weird. Felt icky. I ended up giving this 2 stars. I gave it 3 stars when I first finished it, and then coming back, talking with the book club at the end of the month and like really revisiting, I had already forgotten this entire book. And when I did like a little mental refresh before our live chats in the book club, I was like, I actually really didn't like this at all. So I bumped it down to a 2-star rating. So unfortunate, but the fall festive vibes were there, I guess. But I didn't really enjoy this book. Next, I read Crossroads by Devony Perry, and she was actually sweet enough to send me a sprayed edge copy of this book, and I think it's absolutely beautiful. So this is a small town, second chance romance, and it takes place on basically a big ranch in Montana, and there's like an inn on this ranch. So our female main character ends up buying this inn from the male main character's dad, and he is completely caught off guard. He is very angry that his dad has sold the inn and sold the property, and she is coming in to kind of like revive it because they're going down, they're in over their head, and financially it's just not sustainable. So that's the present day, and then we also get the past point of view from sequential summers that these two characters have spent together and how they kind of grew up together and how their connection first developed. And we have like this big looming conflict that obviously has happened in the past that we don't exactly know what happened, but definitely caused a harsh divide between our romantic interests. I'm a sucker for second chance romance. I'm a sucker for past and present point of view. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it a 4-star, and it's a short book too. So if you want something that is just quick and bingeable, it's also available on Kindle Unlimited, so accessible if you have that. I highly would recommend this. I'm excited to read the second book. I think this is a interconnected standalone series, and I'm excited to continue it. It's also my first Devoney Perry book, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, so I'm excited to continue reading more of her. Then I read the first 2 books in the Heartstopper series. So this I actually filmed in my reading books outside of my comfort zone vlog. So if you want more in-depth thoughts on this book, please go check that out. But these are graphic novels, which is why it was out of my comfort zone, because I've never read a graphic novel in my adult life. Like I used to read them as a kid, but never since I like got back into reading as an adult. This is essentially a high school male LGBTQ romance, and I didn't expect the graphic novel format to like be as emotional as like reading a book. I thought there would be more of like a disconnect, or like I would be less invested, but I fell in love with these characters. I think the story was beautiful. I love their connection. I love their relationship. Just super, super sweet. I gave the first book 4 stars, and I gave the second book 3 stars. I feel like this one was a little more surface level. I don't know. I like the character development of Nick, one of our main characters, but I feel like the book as a whole was just a little more surface level. The first one though, I fully fell in love with them. Like I was fully emotionally invested in them and in their story, and I wanted to just root for them and give them a hug. Like these characters are so sweet, and I hope to continue this series. I'm really enjoying it. Then on my Kindle, I read No Exit by Taylor Adams, and this is the second Taylor Adams book that I have read. The first one was The Last Word, and I think after reading this one, I've concluded that her books are just a little gory for me. They are bloody, they are descriptive, they are just gory. Like there's a lot of violence, and I'm more like psychological twisted thriller is more the vibe I like. And so this was good. It was fast paced. I was invested, but it was a little like gross for me at times. I also watched the movie adaptation after I read this book, and it just, the casting was weird. It felt very low budget. Don't watch the movie. If you've read the book, well, I wouldn't recommend watching the movie at least. I can't tell you what to do with your time, but it wasn't good. But this book essentially is about a group of 5 people that end up stranded together at a rest stop because they are caught in a blizzard in Colorado. This book takes place over a 24-hour period, and as like the night progresses, as they're all stranded together, our main character realizes that someone among the group is a kidnapper and also very violent. So this is kind of like a whodunit, trust no one, violent, gory, creepy, eerie, fast-paced. It feels more like an action thriller than like a psychological twisted thriller, but if you're into that, then definitely a great book for you. I give this 3 stars personally because I enjoyed my time reading it. Like I was engaged the entire way, like I wasn't not invested, but the gory elements were just a little bit much for me. Then I read Keeping 13. This is the second book in the Boys of Tommen series, and this book was long. I feel like my entire month of reading was Keeping 13. Like it felt like it took me all month long, and I know it didn't. I know that's dramatic, but this is such a long book. And honestly, that's my only complaint. I love the characters. I love this series. I love the storyline. Like I'm invested. These characters are starting to feel like family. They really are. But it just felt like I would have enjoyed this book more if it was like 300 pages shorter, like a significant amount shorter. It was really, really long. That said though, I will be continuing the series. I'm not giving up now. I want to read book 3 in November. And my goal is to get caught up to all the books that have been released by the end of the year. So we shall see where it goes. I ended up giving this one a 4-star. It's a really emotional book. I would definitely check trigger warnings because there are a lot of sensitive topics, and like my heart just broke consistently time and time again throughout reading this book. But at the same time, I was like slightly frustrated at how long the book was because it just felt like it could have been shorter, and I feel like it would have benefited from being shorter. Maybe it's a personal preference, I don't know, but that's my personal take. Then I read Atomic Habits, and this is a nonfiction. I guess you could classify it as like self-help. I don't rate nonfiction, memoirs, poetry, anything like that. It just feels weird to rate it on the same scale as fiction, so I don't really rate them. But I've read this book before. This is my second time reading it, and it's nothing groundbreaking in my opinion. Like, I feel like we know all the things. It just is nice to kind of have a refresher and have it put in like concise format. It's basically about like how your daily habits and like your micro habits and behaviors have mass impacts on your entire life, and like how you can train yourself to have better habits and how it can have a huge impact on your life. And yeah, I mean, it was fine. It is what it is, you know? I have no like great insights or in-depth thoughts about this. Similarly, also in the reading books outside of my comfort zone vlog, I read Extreme Ownership. This is another nonfiction. This is a somewhat memoir and also like a leadership book. I think this is kind of like entrepreneurial leadership, could be classified as that. This is about 2 Navy SEALs telling their stories, and they take the lessons that they learned in the Navy and apply them to business models and how you can be successful in a business setting. This again is nothing I feel like that's brand new information or like groundbreaking information, but to see it compiled so concisely and like put together so clearly, I enjoyed my time reading it. I mean, it's not a book I will be like shouting from the rooftops that I think everyone needs to read, but there are good messages about leadership and honestly just like interacting with other humans and how to be a positive impact on your environment and parenting and friendships and just human interaction as a whole. I think there are some important lessons about that. Then I read Today, Tonight, Tomorrow, and this is a young adult romance. And if you know me, I don't normally read young adult. I don't really connect to young adult books, but this one is an exception. I really enjoyed this. This was actually a 4-star read for me, which is really high for a young adult book. And this was so fun because our female main character is so bookish. She's a romance book reader, which I connected to so deeply. And also the city of Seattle is like a huge part of this book. And as a Seattle local, I had so much fun reading it. Basically, we have 2 academic rivals and they are at the last day of high school. They are both vying for like the valedictorian spot, and they've just had like academic rivalry throughout their entire time in school together. But it is now the last day. They are graduating, they are done with high school, and there's one last hurrah. So they have this game where it's basically like a huge scavenger hunt across the city of Seattle. And simultaneously, they have targets that they're going after, like to rip off their armband. They have set targets to find while they're also fulfilling the scavenger hunt, if that makes sense. So these 2 rivals end up kind of working together for this end of the year game for the senior class. And I don't know, their romance is just really fun. I liked the banter. I liked the like tension and the rivalry and seeing them get to know each other. And most of all, I loved the like references to Seattle. Growing up in Seattle and knowing the city so well, it was so much fun to read about like the Fremont Troll and the Gum Wall and like just so many things. If you know the city at all, I think you'll really enjoy this book. So like I said, 4 stars, really a great book, especially for being young adult. I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. And I will be reading the second book in this series. It's called like Past, Present, Future. I'll definitely be reading that one too. Then I have my favorite book of the month, and that is The Last Letter. This is coming out in a future vlog, and this book, you guys, ruined me. This was an easy 5-star read and it broke my heart. Like, I was sitting on the floor, tears streaming down my face. You will see it in the vlog coming out. It was gut-wrenching. I don't want to give details because I went into this book pretty blind, and I'm really glad that I did. It is somewhat of a military romance, I'll just say that. And it is, wow. You should read this book. This is incredible. I'm excited to continue reading more Rebecca Yarros romances. I didn't like Fourth Wing by her, but I think if I stick to like her contemporary romance genre, if it's anything like this book, I will really enjoy them. Then I listened to the Widow's Husband's Secret Lie by Frida McFadden. And this is satire. This is a satirical novella. And I think the audiobook was like 3 hours and I listened to it on 2 times speed. So I listened to it start to finish in one sitting and I was laughing out loud. It's ridiculous. The best word I can use to describe this book is honestly, it's just ridiculous. It is, she's poking fun at her own writing. She's making fun of thrillers. She's making fun of fantasy books. She's making fun of authors. She's making fun of like big moments in like history. I don't want to say history, like pop culture references that you will pick up on. It's hilarious. It was truly like laughing out loud funny and not like anything that I've ever read by Frida before, but it's also so Frida. Like, I don't even know. I gave this 3 stars because I enjoyed my time reading it, but it was also a novella and just ridiculous. Like, that is truly the best word for it. So 3-star rating. I think it's fun. It's really short. If you want something just short and sweet to make you laugh, read this. And the last book of the month is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and this book was beautiful. This writing was so poetic. Our buddy read this with a couple of women from my Patreon book club. We formed like our own little separate group chat because we all wanted to read this book and it wasn't a book club book. And we were talking about it and I was like, girls, I think I could have annotated something on every single page of this book. Like, it was gorgeous, the writing. I am giving this 4 stars, but I fully reserve the right to bump it up to a 4.5 as I sit with it. The messages, the meaning, like I said, the writing style. I put this off for years because I was intimidated by it, and I think rightfully so. I wouldn't say like after reading this book, I wouldn't be like, oh, I shouldn't have been intimidated. It was rightfully so that I was intimidated. This book is heavy, it's intense, it's kind of complex. I ended up having to like read and reread sections of this book to make sure I was figuring out what was actually going on and following correctly, but I'm so glad that I read it. So this is essentially about Addie LaRue, who was born in the 1600s, and she ends up living forever, but the one drawback, if you will, is that no one can remember her. So like, she can interact with people, but the second they leave the room or like lose sight of her, she's forgotten from their mind. And so naturally this is about like connection and loneliness, and also a lot of messages about time and like the fragility of time and the importance of time, romantic relationships, family relationships. Oh my gosh, this is like the first book. Well, I shouldn't say the first book. This is one of the few books with fantasy elements that I've been like fully invested in. I could just ramble about this all day long. This will also be coming out in a future vlog, so I'm gonna not give all my thoughts away. So stay tuned for the vlog. Make sure you're subscribed here so you don't miss the vlog, and I will go on and on about this book, but it was beautiful. It was really, really beautiful. And that concludes the month of October, all the books that I read in the month of October. Like I said, decent variety, pushed myself out of my comfort zone for a few of them, and had some really great reads that I will definitely be remembering. But I think that concludes this month's wrap up. That's really all I have to say. I feel like that was pretty short and sweet. I didn't ramble as much this time. But before you go, I want you to leave a comment down below and let me know what your favorite book from the month of October was. Mine was The Last Letter. What was yours? But make sure you're following me on all the things. I'm most active on Instagram and TikTok, and those are always linked down below, as well as my Patreon book club if you want to join us. We are reading The Women in the month of November, which I'm super excited for and excited to talk about. So all of that is linked down below. Also make sure you're subscribed here so you don't miss any future videos, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye, book besties.